Welcome aboard to NJ.com's chat here. Steve Politi, our sports columnist, joining us to talk about the fallout from the Sayreville football program as this week we get the cancellation of the rest of their season amidst the hazing allegations. And unfortunately, so many people on either side of this, should the season have been canceled, and the allegations that are out there. Steve is with us now to talk about his column and the situation in general. Steve, how are you this afternoon?
I'm good, Joe. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. This story is obviously, uncomfortable to read through, and it's uncomfortable to talk about because there are innocent kids here who are being hazed, which is kind of an old ritual that should have been, out of sports, out of youth sports a long time ago, but unfortunately it's still there. Now that the season has been canceled, what was your initial reaction when the superintendent did make that decision?
My initial reaction was good for him, and I thought that was the only decision, if that was the right decision, given the seriousness of what's happening at that school when you've got investigators and police and prosecutors interviewing your football players and inside the school investigating something that happened. And while we don't know what happened yet, we don't have the details yet. Clearly, it is of a serious nature, or the police would not be involved. And I don't see how playing a football game now would do anything but cause further problems, and especially for a lot of kids in that program who might have been affected by this. So I think it was the right decision.
Now, on the other side of the spectrum, there are kids on that football team, are kids around that football team, whether it be cheerleaders or anyone else that is involved with football games, that obviously didn't do anything wrong here, and by proxy, they, in a way, are being punished because that's getting taken away from them, whether it be the band or cheerleaders. And we have some detractors on the other side that said this season should not have been canceled. We have a parent, Teresa Tambori, who voiced her displeasure with everything.
So you made a bad decision, and now you have to be accounted for this. But the innocent ones shouldn't be punished because they didn't do anything wrong. And to me, in my opinion, I would give them their football season back, because this affects the football season, the players. It affects the cheerleading squad. It affects the marching band. And all of these kids worked so hard to do something what they love to do. And it's being taken away from them.
Steve, while I understand where she's coming from there, while I understand the passion she has, I don't see the alternative to what the superintendent in Sayreville did. Did you see an alternative here? Is there anything else he could have done to appease that woman, but also do the right thing here?
No, I don't think so. And I think we're losing sight of who the innocent people are. The innocent people who are hurt were the kids who were hazed, first and foremost. And I think that when parents start saying and throwing that around, that, well, what about my kid? He wasn't involved. Well, I also would point out that, something happened in this locker room, and this just wasn't, from what I understand, from what I read, and what the superintendent said when he canceled the season, was that it was just a pervasive part of bullying, was just part of the program's culture, from what the superintendent explained, which means that there have been other incidents that weren't reported, and that no one in that program stood up and said they saw something, and I think that speaks to it too. That there's more here to this than perhaps one incident. And what surprises me is that the parents, instead of asking questions to their children about what happened here, why didn't you stand up, why didn't you do something about this, are asking questions to the superintendent, well, why are you canceling the season? I think it's almost outrageous to me, and I feel like that might go to part of the problem in Sayreville. I think that there's this culture of football that's held up above everything else, and I think clearly that the priorities seem to be a little screwed up.
Steve, my next question was going to be ask you how this happens, how this culture, forms in a town, and then you think about the Sayreville football program, very successful on the field for a very long time. They're one of the best in the state, but the way you put it there is perfect to me, because this has to start somewhere, and the fact that some questions are being put at why aren't we playing football games rather than what is going on inside the locker room, that's alarming.
And I hope it's a minority. And it just happens to be a vocal minority. There have to be parents in that town who are outraged, and we haven't heard from a lot of them yet. And I suppose that that they're out there. I hope they're out there. But from some of the parents, and the fact that their first concern is, what about the football game? What about my kids? To me, again, that just speaks to something being very wrong.
Steve, now, where do you think this kind of thing, where is the responsibility here? Obviously, the superintendent took ultimate responsibility by canceling the season, but below that, the coaching staff, I mean, look, kids act ridiculous. Hazing is part of youth sports. It's part of college sports. Really, it shouldn't be, but it is at times. Where are the coaches when this happens? That's the part to me that I just shake my head whenever I hear stories like this.
Yep.
How do you let that happen in your locker room?
That's a very good question, and we spoke to a parent who said the kids on the freshman team were dressing outside the locker room because they were afraid to be inside there, be the last kids there, and kids were running to cars. Clearly, someone had to see something. Coaches had to be aware something was going on. They have not spoken to what will happen to these coaches. I think we have to sort out the details first of what happened, but I would be very surprised if this coaching staff is back because of what happened.
Steve, we had a comment on the post here for our video. Someone asked, what is the appropriate punishment here when this all is filtered out? And right now it's teetering between, we don't know exactly what happened, as you put it earlier. When we do and when everything is fleshed out, what is the appropriate punishment for both the coaches and then this school in general moving forward?
I think right now we have to ask there might be legal consequences. There might be criminal charges. We don't know. I mean, if the fact the prosecutor and the police are involved, certainly the punishment will be in the hands of the court system if they find some charges. As far as discipline within the school, I mean, I think that's a way down the line before we can start sorting out what sort of penalties the kids will get.
You had a quote in your column about this entire situation and about the superintendent canceling the season. Can you give the gist of that quote, tell what you meant there by putting it in there, about the innocent and really, kind of an overarching theme of what should be the theme here?
Right, and I was very impressed with something that the superintendent said, that Dr. Richard Labby said, as he was speaking about this, that it's the responsibility of people to stand up, of teammates to stand up. It's not, this is how you stop bullying. It's not the kid who's getting bullied who's gonna step in and take control of the situation. It's other people. It's witnesses. It's making sure that it's not acceptable and that people know it's not acceptable. And clearly something happened here where it was part of what was going on in this around this team, where that people weren't stepping forward. And I think that's a very important message. And if there's any, you don't like to use the lessons learned thing, it's kind of a cliche, but if there is something that hopefully will be learned in other places, that's what it is.
If someone just dropped out of nowhere, Steve, they've been absent from NJ.com, absent from New Jersey really for the past week, and they just started to hear about this, when did this whole event, all this story come forward to you? When did you start hearing about this? The first thing I heard was last week with the coach who got in some trouble, and they canceled the game last Thursday, and all of a sudden you wake up Monday morning and the entire thing took on a whole different direction. Right.
Well, same for me. Yeah, I mean, certainly unusual to have a game canceled. Then news broke of the coach being arrested for having steroids and other things in his car. Just making the natural conclusion, you thought, well, that must be it. But it turned out very quickly that it wasn't. And by Friday, it was clear that something else had happened, something serious had happened. The press conference at the school was on Friday afternoon, and the story's just been developing from there. I think we've got a long way to go. I mean, there's so many things we don't know. We don't know exactly what happened. We don't know how many victims there are. We don't know how many players are involved. There's just a lot of unanswered questions, and I think that this one could be going for a while.
Yeah, it certainly could be. Steve Politi joining us here on NJ.com, talking about the Sayreville football allegations, the fact the season has been canceled here. For the rest of the football schedule, do you know what happens to the rest of these teams that Sayreville is supposed to play? It's always, that part of it is always like a fascinating subplot. All the other schools that do get involved here indirectly.
Right. I don't have the answer to that question. I know we put up a post on the site. I didn't click on it because honestly I didn't really care. I mean, I think this is so much more important than what happens to the PowerPoints in the playoffs. But I'm guessing that the forfeits will be added to their victory totals. I don't know any other way to do it. So I mean I would assume at least.
I would too. Steve, I'll leave you with this one. Why, in your opinion, does this happen in certain schools in certain areas? I mean, look, football is it's a regional thing. It is a cultural thing. Towns have a lot of pride in their football team, and obviously Sayreville's had a lot of success, which has bred that over the years. But is there something deeper? Is this just isolated incidents? I mean, why do you think hazing happens to this level every once in a while in a certain town, now being Sayreville?
It's a great question. You would think that it would be past this. You would think that that we would have evolved, and we have so many things in place now. We have laws against bullying. We've seen what happens to communities when hazing's involved. I mean, there have been so many over the years cases and communities sort of ripped apart by things like this. You'd think we'd be past it, but again, it's young people making poor decisions, and that's what it comes back to. And in this case, I think, and in most cases, they're in a place or a culture that accepts it, and I think that's part of the problem.
Steve, are you surprised, were you surprised by the reaction of the parents, some of them, like you said, maybe a vocal minority, or was that something you kind of expected here, that there would be people in this town, would be people that did not want the season canceled and really, distracted themselves from the larger issue? Did it surprise you, the reaction, or did you kind of expect this?
No, it did, and I was at the press conference, and the room was filled with parents. Most of the seats were taken by parents, and honestly, my first reaction was, well, that's good that there are people in this town concerned about the safety of their young men and their kids at school. And when the first question was about why did you cancel the game, I said, well, there's just something a little worked here. So I was surprised then. I guess I wasn't surprised, based on that first press conference, that the reaction would continue. When he announced the season was canceled, I certainly wasn't surprised then. But the initial reaction was I was very surprised. Absolutely.
Steve, we appreciate a few minutes here. I'm sure the story will evolve, and hopefully next time you and I do a chat could be for some good news around New Jersey sports. How's that sound?
That would be unusual, wouldn't it?
It would. Steve Politi, NJ.com. Check out his column on the Sayreville football situation. Thanks, everyone, for joining us right here on NJ.com.
Bye.